All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this story out. So we'll just kind of kick it right into it and jump right in. So Mingsheng, thank you for joining us on the pair program. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Tim. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, and for our listeners, this is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. So this is a fun discussion to hear a little bit more about your unique career journey, where you kind of came from, how you arrived at this current point, and your seat today as the CEO and co-founder of Bluesky. So I always like to start by having you provide the listeners with the quick overview of Bluesky and the problems that you are solving here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tim. So at Bluesky, we focus on making data clouds cost efficient. So to unpack that a bit, data clouds are the cloud-based platforms that provide data processing support and increasingly also ML support. And one of the pain points for the last 5 to 10 years of the world transitioning to cloud is that people need to make sure their cost efficiency by moving the workloads to data cloud can be as high as, or ideally even higher than on-prem. And unfortunately, unlike what some of the cloud vendors have been marketing, it is not always the case. And that's a combination with the limitations of the cloud platform, as well as the best practices of how people use the clouds yet to be shaped up. And this is where companies like Bluesky come in, and we're looking to help the world finish the transition to the cloud by providing the tooling, the expertise, the recommendations to make the workloads cost efficient. So that's our mission at Bluesky. We started earlier this year, and happy to talk about our journey so far, and maybe also the my personal journey prior to leading to this point.
Yeah, very fascinating. I mean, obviously, a space that is just getting bigger and bigger each year. More and more data coming out, and one of the taglines that jumped out to me on your all's website was your Snowflake Copilot. And so, obviously, with the rise of these cloud data warehouses like Snowflake, this is going to be something that companies are going to want to adapt to just to optimize and become more efficient when they start gathering more and more of this data. So let's go back in time a little bit here and tell me a little bit more about whereabouts you grew up and how you got into the world of tech.
Yeah, sure. So maybe let me just go it backwards chronologically. So before Bluesky, I spent close to 9 years at Google as an engineering lead. I was fortunate to have led multiple teams, uh, building out some of the mission critical software components, such as the storage and querying layer underneath the $100 billion ads. That's where it was very exciting, but sometimes nerve wracking to see every transaction going through my code and my team's code. And fortunately, we were able to make the operations pretty smooth, and we managed to make the backend much faster and cheaper, and in turn, improving users and experiences. Because who doesn't like, having more interactive dashboards that are supported by more performant backends? And after that, I got a chance to move to Google's AI division, Google Brain team, and was fortunate to lead a team to take the first version of TensorFlow. As many of you might know, it powers Google's internal mission critical AI workloads, and it was built by Jeff Dean and others. Jeff was known as the engineering god at Google, and we were fortunate to step on the shoulder of the giants like Jeff, learn about the workloads, the new challenges, and we took the backend, the TensorFlow runtime to the next level. Revamped it, launched it later last year, and was able to gain really big impact by making the mission critical AI workloads like ads faster and cheaper, and in turn allowed them to reclaim the resources, the data center resources, to then invest into new business features, launch new features to improve ads quality and improve monetization. So that's one key insight I also gained from the cost efficiency journey, where we're not only improving just the bottom line, but by helping people reclaim and use the resources in other ways to monetize, it also improves the top line. And I can go back further. Before the Google journey, I spent 5 years working on early stage enterprise database companies. That was back in Boston. So there I learned a ton by being an engineer in early stage companies. I got exposed to not only working on engineering problem, but also being customer facing, supporting and upselling deals as a sales engineer, and also doing product marketing work, tech evangelism, like giving talks at large scale conferences like Hadoop. And that helped me build a foundation to appreciate the critical elements needed to make enterprise software successful beyond having good tech and engineering products. All of the sales, marketing, and other elements need to come together. And before that, I spent 5 years pursuing my master and PhD degree in computer science, specializing in databases. So when people say, oh, this database problem is really hard, we need a PhD to figure it out, I'm happy that at least I got that dimension covered. And before that, I was born and grew up in Shanghai, spent the first 22 years there, finishing my undergrad degree in computer science. So I'm a first generation immigrant, excited to be here pursuing my American dream as an entrepreneur and really living the dream every day.
That's a wonderful story. So you came over when you said you're in your 20s, and where did you come into the States? Were you out West Coast? You said you touched on Boston. Whereabouts were you located when you first came into the States?
So about when I was about to finish my undergrad in Shanghai, I applied to various US grad schools, received a few offers, and was fortunate to get a very good scholarship from Cornell. And I like Cornell, not just because it's one of the Ivy League schools, very reputable, but I believe it also has the strongest computer science program. And I especially liked the database group. My advisor was Professor Johannes Gilke, a very strong scientist and also a well-rounded manager and a great leader. Currently, Johannes is a research director at Microsoft Research Redmond Lab. I'm still in good touch with Johannes, and he's actually one of our angel investors and advisors to Bluesky. So really fortunate to have met with great people, mentors like Johannes, and kind of build out my computer science and database foundation.
I love to hear how these folks come back into your life. Later on. This is one of the first folks that you interacted with when you came into the States, and now he's participating as an investor in your current ventures. That's fantastic.
Indeed,
And
it's been
looking
a
at your
pleasure.
profile, you spent a little bit of time at Microsoft as well.
Yes, I visited Microsoft Research, I believe 3 summers in a row when I was a grad student. I always loved each visit. So when I got invited back, uh, out of just continued that having more good time at work, and I loved the summer at Seattle. So uh, I didn't really then go and look at other places. There are other wonderful places as well, but I love the
Mhm.
3 summers at Microsoft. Learned a lot. Worked on cutting edge technologies like extending Microsoft SQL Server with stream processing, and that happened to also be my PhD thesis topic. And it's great to see how innovation can get landed in industry setup. And that's also one of my motivations for then getting into a startup as the first segment of my journey after graduation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The first startup that you joined with, first of all, are they still around or?
Yes, the company was founded by a professor named Stonebreaker, Mike Stonebreaker, with a co-founder, CEO Andy Palmer. And by the way, Andy is also one of our advisors at Bluesky. It's really fortunate to continue to connect with them and get their support and insights. Professor Stonebreaker has about 4 decades of foundational experiences and contributions to building out SQL databases. And because of that, he received a Turing Award known as the Nobel Prize in computer sciences. And I was fortunate to be able to work at one of his companies. He moved from Berkeley to MIT in the early 2000s, and he founded that company out of the MIT research group. And so that
Mhm.
was my first segment. That company was later acquired by HP in 2011. I joined in 2008 with the anticipation out of a naive young graduate student that it will become the next Oracle, so to speak. because I read its research paper. I still distinctly remember back in 2005, and I read follow-up work in 2007. I am a big believer its technology can leapfrog the incumbents by being 10x faster and more scalable. But little did I know, in order for a company to be successful at the scale of replacing the incumbent, there's a lot more to just having the cutting edge technology and product. So that was my 4 years learning at Vertica, where after the first 3 years, it was acquired by HP.
Mm.
Everybody was super excited around me, but frankly, I felt quite disappointed just because of my own expectation being set too high. But the silver lining is then after the acquisition, I got a wonderful 1 year tour of being customer facing and going, as I mentioned earlier, working with the big Vertica customers like Syngas and others, where I deeply understood the workloads, was able to demonstrate our new product features, help solve new business problems, upsell, close deals. So that also generated a new sense of satisfaction out of my work. And that's
Mm.
how I learned to talk in customers' language and present complex technical ideas in a way that can get understood and appreciated. And that's the foundation I take to my day-to-day work at Bluesky in the CEO role.
Yeah, it's a fascinating profile because you don't often see so many engineers that kind of border this line of product marketing, and I think that's something that through this experience and through this story, you can start to see how product marketing and how vital that becomes as a part of a business and their growth is and really being able to relate to those customers and to get that opportunity in such a large organization like that, I think is it's a fascinating piece of the story that stands out. So you moved to Google, and I'm just curious, how did you come across the Google opportunity? Was it somebody from your past life that was over there and said, Mingsheng, you got to get over here. We're doing some really interesting things. How did you settle on Google as that next place that you wanted to spot your career?
Indeed, it's funny that so tracing back to our grad student time, I went to Microsoft Seattle for internship. Some of my friends went to Bay Area, Google for internship around 2005, 2006 time, and some of them never came back. That didn't really, I didn't really dig more much into it. I knew there were good places in the valley, but I'm very focused on finishing my PhD study. And in 2008, I got a very good offer from Google. And for family reason, I had to stay in the East Coast. So I was thinking about joining Google New York. But then I ran into this wonderful Vertica opportunity where out of the company's 8 engineers, everyone interviewed me, and even sales and product management inserted themselves into the loop. So the interview was super exhausting, full day, but I was very impressed. And that was one of the reasons I chose Vertica over Google at that time, naively thinking that I can always go back to Google any day. And that that prediction came true. And so back in 2013, I've been in touch with my friends who joined Google earlier on. They told me about all of the wonderful innovations, the engineering culture, and everything there. And so that was a place that I really had positive impression. And so back in 2013, an opportunity opened up. Uh, an old friend and Cornell classmate of mine, office mate of mine, helped me connect with their VP of ads who runs the ads and database backend. So I was recruited at a pretty senior position, and I was able to leverage my past academic background as well as industry background at Vertica and Hadapt to then make direct contribution to Google's ads backend, as we mentioned earlier. I led a team to basically revamp the background, the backend for storage and querying, upgrading the storage system from row-based to columnar. And back then, I thought columnar upgrade was a piece of cake, so to speak, because I have done this, I have seen it, how it's done at Vertica. But turns out at Google's workload in terms of scale and requirements, it's very different. So there's a lot of new learning for me. And in the end, we were able to finish it, not just completing the product, but also migrating all the existing data in about 1,000 steps. So the analogy there, as people use, is flying the plane while changing the engine, one little piece at a time. And fortunately, the migration was very smooth. And this was pretty scary, even in hindsight, because changing the storage format means data might get corrupted. And if data is corrupted, then ads users will be very unhappy. And so I'm very thankful for the leadership's support and trusting our team in this piece of work. And also through the hard work and a bit of a luck, we were able to pull it off. So very proud of that achievement.
Yeah, it's got to build a bit of confidence for you as an engineer, coming in and getting that level of trust, from your team to, go forward with this data and ensuring that it's, all quality driven. Your title when you come into Google is tech lead, supporting analytical data infrastructure. Is that right?
Yes.
And you're in this seat for looks like 4 years,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
then you end up transitioning into the TensorFlow kind of environment. Is that right?
Yes.
And then one of the big things that jumps out here is, in 2019, your role, it looks like, becomes this head of engineering within the TensorFlow department. So we talk a lot on this podcast about FANG environments, obviously comparing some of these to startup environments. But I just want to touch real quick for our listeners that are maybe navigating career growth within FANG environments. What are some of those things that you would recommend to folks that are maybe starting their career off in a large big tech organization, and wanting to navigate that career journey? Anything that you recall that would be beneficial to folks that are looking to build their career growth within those FANG environments?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, a quick clarification. I was running the TensorFlow backend called runtime. So I was head of engineering of TensorFlow runtime. TensorFlow
Okay.
itself is a larger organization where my manager was one of the senior leads for TensorFlow's engineering. So yes, I did have a fair share of my experiences, having spent close to 9 years at Google and earlier a few beautiful summers at Microsoft. So I can talk about all of the great things I appreciate at a place like Google and how that contrasts with startup environments.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Google has a lot more resources, and that translates to the tendency to give engineers more room to innovate, to experiment, and sometimes make mistakes. The management culture can be more encouraging, and that is great. It's also more hands-off. So for certain type of people, uh, it might be senior people who would prefer more autonomy, but it could also be junior engineers who would prefer to just try out their things more with little guidance. This could be a pretty good setup. So in my experience for Google, there were two kinds of engineering projects. One is pretty incremental. For such a large operational base at Google, making any change is non-trivial. It requires a lot of uh, efforts in understanding the existing design code base and thinking about how to carefully extend the existing code base with the new feature, how to test it and launch it carefully. Sometimes, as I mentioned, involving dozens or even hundreds of steps. So even a minor change might take quarters, if not years of efforts. These efforts are very rewarding in terms of the end impact, even though it may feel tiny because of the large operational base at Google, let's say $100 billion ads. If someone is able to improve the efficiency by even 0.1%, that is $1 billion worth of impact. So impact-wise, it is great. Uh, it depends on the engineering taste. Some engineers would prefer to tackle larger scope challenges. In that case, this kind of project may not be a good fit. And then the other kind of project is more, I guess I could call it blue sky like project. Think bigger, experiment with things. Don't worry about the operational stack. Try to bootstrap something from scratch. And as I mentioned earlier, since Google has the resource to sponsor these kind of riskier projects, some engineers almost working in a research capacity enjoy this type of freedom. Of course, now with the down economy, it seems various fan companies are tightening up the leadership ring a little bit. I understand that, but in the good times, such projects were pretty well supported. Many of these projects fail in the end, and Google still supports them. the engineers can continue to, if not getting promoted, at least continue to get the same great salary benefit and continue to experiment and innovate. And then occasionally you have a project like the ads backend, the column store I mentioned. It was productized into a backend system called MESA, MESA, and it's then carried over to the next generation system called Napa, just like Napa Valley. And there were research papers on these subjects as well. So that's the best of both worlds. We get to innovate from ground up, and in the end, through hard work and a bit of a luck, uh, impact the production, integrate that into the production. So these are very satisfying experiences. Now,
Hmm.
one thing I would say just to balance the arguments a bit is in contrast to startup, uh, sometimes the work pace may be a bit slower. I already mentioned one reason, just the complexity of understanding the existing stack and trying to understand it, extend it properly. The other factor is just the human complexity, the organization complexity. There might be more stakeholders we need to align with, and that's super important. And if I would be happy to share my later journey in the TensorFlow organization, especially that kind of highlighted some of those challenges.
Yeah, the human complexity is the area that we like to kind of pick apart. We say a lot of things that we work on here at Hatch and at Hatchpad. The community focuses on this human side of engineering. When you move into a startup environment, things are going to be very fast moving. You might not have all of those resources that maybe you could have leaned into at an environment like Google. When you made the transition to Bluesky, let's jump into this now because I think this is a good pivot point. What would you say was some of those instrumental and valuable things from Google that you would say, like on the human side of things, that played a part in you as a founder, and getting the trust of folks that are joining your team in those early stages? What was it that you say was instrumental or helpful for you?
Yeah, so a couple elements. First of all, it is the credibility we carry. My co-founder Jen from Uber and myself from Google. So given the track record, we were able to earn respect from our founding team members through the interview process and then the day-to-day work. Another part is the engineering culture, the practice of, for example, thinking from first principles. So we try to learn from others' lessons, but also when it may not be aligned with our intuition, we are not afraid of digging deeper and trying to derive. Trying to derive the truth. So, for example, conventional wisdom can be, well, by moving workloads to the cloud, since the cloud vendors have a lot more expertise and they have economy at scale. Of course, the cost efficiency should be higher than running your own workloads on-prem, right? But the reality isn't that simple. With cloud, there are new challenges with how to use them efficiently. We have seen, for example, from one user workload, a single employee could accidentally consume $10,000 worth of credits without generating any business value. This is because all their queries actually failed, and maybe they were not aware of it. So you see these credits being burned with no value, and the head of engineering, head of data did not have visibility. So that's one of the examples where there were not sufficient best practices or guardrails installed to basically provide a proper governance. I'm sure at the same company, if an employee goes and have a business lunch that exceeds a threshold, let's say $100, they need manager approval, right? But so how can they spend $10,000 of compute credits with no questions asked? So these are the kind of problems that excite us. We want to figure out both on the technical side, but also on the organization, the human side, the process side, how to improve the processes. So from first principle thinking, then there's also being curious and learning driven. Uh, and when we have learning, share with others. And there might be lessons we learned from negative experiences, and we want to carry over good culture practices from Google, like blameless postmortem. So these are the good elements we carry over to Bluesky.
Mm. So with Bluesky, what is the current headcount?
We have about 12 full-time members, mostly in the R&D department, product and engineering, but we also
Okay.
have an exceptionally strong and yet small business team.
And you all are you have some seed funding, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're backed by Greylock,
Yeah,
which is
fortunate to
a
be led by Greylock with support from additional VCs and angel investors as well.
and Greylock, obviously a very well-renowned venture firm. How many meetings did it take you before getting Greylock to invest? I'm always curious from a founder's perspective. This journey of getting investment. Talk me through that, and why do you think Greylock, decided that Blue Sky is a good investment?
Great question. So let me try and speak from the Greylock perspective, but with a caveat that maybe this is a question better for our board member, our investor, Jerry Chen. Jerry is wonderful. We had a small number of meetings before having this handshake agreement, and we were fortunate. I think one of the reasons for the low overhead is we have had prior relationship with the Greylock investors, so they kind of knew the past work for a number of years. And for myself, I also got a strong intro to another Greylock investor back then, Sarah Guo. Sarah started her own fund recently, but we are still getting great support from Sarah, of course, as well as Jerry. And basically through the intro and through the past work, basically the engagement started at a pretty high level of the foundation.
And you mentioned about 12 folks. Most of these folks, are engineering folks, tech folks. I noticed on LinkedIn, a lot of these folks come with the title of like founding engineer. This is something that we've done a lot of research on. It's one of the hardest positions to recruit for. What is it that you would say was helpful for you all with recruiting this first round of engineers in those early stages? And the title of founding engineer, and I know that sometimes titles can mean something different to everyone, but what would you say differentiates a founding engineer from maybe just like a senior engineer?
That's a great question, Tim. So we subscribe to the culture where the company initially shouldn't have superfluous titles.
Mm.
When we give people unnecessary titles, it might generate more problems. So we try to minimize that. So we don't really have levels or levels that indicate the engineering seniority. This might be different from some other startups, but that's the culture we subscribe to. So at Blue Sky, we only have titles for customer-facing roles where it's useful for customers to understand uh, the role of the individuals they work with. But then internally, we would want to just everyone work in a pretty flat way, and it's meritocracy, merit-based when we debate ideas. And so for that reason, we don't really have levels like senior versus, let's say, principal engineer. Instead, we use words that are more factual. If they joined when we are still in the founding stage, then they are founding engineer. It's just a fact. It doesn't otherwise differentiate them from the later engineers who join. And someone can be an area lead. So let's say marketing lead or deployment engineering lead. And the lead is also a fact. They're currently leading that department, but otherwise we don't at this point provide different levels of director versus VP, etc.
Hmm.
That type of titles.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's going to be the type of thing too as the company evolves. Thinking through, the how the org specifically. When we talk, we like to dial in on like the engineering teams or the product teams. Have you thought through, when is that level that you're needing a head of engineering or a director of engineering, and what is it that comes into play for you that sparks like this is probably the good time for this?
Yeah. So our view is initially the engineering team. needs to have a number of very strong individual contributors, 10x engineers, and generalists, and have a kind of culture of being scrappy, in the sense, let's say when I worked at Google, before we start any large scale effort, people are basically conditioned or cultured to write large design docs, because that's also part of a big way of how they get evaluating their performance. But that's not how startups operate. In the end, we prioritize on getting things work. And then along the journey, of course, we need to emit, just enough communication bits, be it in person or write a short email or Slack or whatever, to make sure we get enough alignment and support from other stakeholders. But then we don't, for the sake of writing a large design doc, we write it. So it's important to have aligned culture where we can move fast. And making correct decision initially is important, but it's even more important when we get new data, we can very quickly course correct. And so these are the traits, soft skills, the culture we seek from founding engineers. When the team
That's great.
scales at some point, we might need a engineering manager, but at this point, we would prefer to have a flat hierarchy because there isn't too much management challenge. People are not asking for performance review, even though we deliver that in a continuous real-time basis when we get feedback. But otherwise, we don't need the formality of having a performance review cycle, which in my experience could be consuming a lot of time and efforts.
Yeah.
So these are a couple of
It's
things. But at some point, as we scale, I'm sure we'll bring in engineering manager, director of engineering, and so on.
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective, when we talk to founders in these smaller stages, you don't want to get too distracted with the org chart at large, how is it going to evolve, but more so let's build, let's focus on our customers, let's be scrappy. I think this is a term that gets tossed quite a bit, and I can super appreciate that, when building a small team over here at Hatch as well, and those first 5 to 10 folks, we were heads down. We were talking about how to generate revenue. We were really focused on our customers, and there will become that time to think bigger. Org evolves, and layers and things of that nature. But right now, it sounds like you all are very heads down, and that's where you need to be. What is what is kind of like the core tech stack of what you all build with?
So we build on the public clouds, mostly AWS. We also use GCP, and we will, of course, want to expand to Azure and maybe other public clouds in the future as needed. And basically, we have ETL tools like Airbyte to extract metadata from customers' Snowflake instance. And this is the metadata like query history that we use to do our own analysis and make optimization recommendations. So that's our secret sauce or core IP. So there we write our internal logic in Python, SQL, and so on to transform, enrich the data, and make recommendations. And then we have a native UI framework to then surface the visibility and the recommendations to the end users.
And is the team fully distributed, or whereabouts are the tech teams kind of located?
We're about half-half. So half of the team is in the Bay Area, but we do recruit in a pretty wide range. Right now, folks are basically concentrated in the US time zones, including Canada. We used to have an engineer in Asia, a contractor, but then it's been a pretty challenging, experience logistically to coordinate in the meeting, especially then with New York and then with Bay Area. So for now, we're going to focus on just the U.S. time zone, and will continue to be open for remote hire, although we will continue to make sure there's enough in-person time. Like back in September, we had a nice all hands team gathering where we flew everybody to the Bay Area, and we would want to do that on a regular basis, not just in the Bay Area, but find some other good, interesting spots to fly people together.
Sounds like you really value that culture, bringing folks together, making sure folks know who one another are on the team versus just another day at work. This is
We
something that
think
you
it's
value.
critical, yes, especially in early stage startup, business wise, it helps for people to build even stronger trust so we can iterate faster, and we may need to uh, pass along new thoughts and tweak on the directions. So it's important to have enough of the bonding. And I think it also improves the personal satisfaction, the
Mhm.
engagement as we work together on a shared mission, being able to more deeply understand, know each other, improves satisfaction.
I want to ask a little bit about the openings that you're actively hiring for, and then we're going to jump into a segment called the 5 second scramble. But before we do that, what are some of those key roles that you would say that are high priority for Blue Sky on the tech front?
So at this point, we are looking for a senior product lead, ideally someone who has done SaaS work before, taken a product from 0 to 1. So understanding how to do user interviews and then select design partners and iterate with them to continue to enhance our product, adding new product features. uh, the founders, we had pretty good technology background. We also worked with product managers in the past companies. So we are kind of covering the product management for the time being and with the support from the very junior product manager currently as well. But we're looking for a senior product lead. And in addition, we're looking for another 10x engineer. They could become our chief architect or in general just a very kind of important tech leadership position with being a strong individual contributor and also showing by example and leading the team on the implementation front. And in addition, a couple senior engineers across different infrastructure functions like DevOps, data pipeline, infra to help us prepare for scaling up to supporting dozens and hundreds of customers down the road.
Sounds like an exciting time to join the company. The current team that's in place, their backgrounds, are they a mixed bag of big tech and startups, or do they tend to have more of a theme of a background?
It's pretty mixed, I would say. So lots of presence from Fan,
Mm,
strong presence from Palantir, and
mm,
also we have an engineer who went along through the journey to take Duolingo through IPO, so growing from
wow.
startup to a more established company, and they have also had data experiences, infra experiences back at Uber. So a very interesting mixture of engineers with data and other infra background and across different stages of the companies as well.
Sounds like an all-star team you've accrued so far. So kudos to the current success. And what would you say is something that folks can get excited about if joining Blue Sky today? What's something that you're really excited about going into 2023?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So really excited about the team and thankful for the opportunity to work with everyone on a daily basis. In terms of what's exciting, first of all, we are looking for people what we call who are missionaries, not mercenaries. So first and foremost, they need to be passionate about our mission of building next generation cloud infra for data and in the future for ML. So starting with making data workloads cost efficient. And uh, along that journey, we want to also understand their personal motivations for joining Blue Sky. No, financial reason can be a good one, but usually we think it should be the third reason, maybe the second, but not the first reason. So just to understand the personal motivation and where they want to grow, and if the aspiration is aligned with Blue Sky. And also personal chemistry bonding is very important. So this way, there will be ups and downs. Joining an early stage company, there is bound to be surprises, temporary setbacks, and if there are mercenaries, they might be kind of exiting at the first sign of things not going well. But we need people who would have enough of a conviction, enough of a confidence and grit to go through the challenges, and I would say also loyalty with each other.
You got to trademark that, missionaries versus mercenaries. That is fantastic philosophy. I think that's really neat. It's the first time I've heard that before, but I think
Thank you, Tim. I don't
it's a
think I
fantastic.
reinvented it.
It just it makes a lot of sense from a startup environment. Joining for those right reasons, and
Mhm,
very easily you can see folks getting distracted of
mhm,
especially maybe coming from a FANG environment, right, where the maybe
mhm,
that comp isn't as equitable as it might have been in the big tech space. But what is your priorities right now? What is it that you're really looking for?
mhm.
Um, I want to close out our last few minutes here with a fun segment that we call the 5 second scramble. And in this segment, what I'll do is ask a few rapid fire questions with you, and you try to sum up your answers within 5 seconds. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So we're going to start with a little bit of the some business discussion, business questions, and then we'll float into some personal. Explain your product to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
You want to make the things you do uh, fast, but also cheap.
Nice. What problems are you solving?
We we help the world finish the transition of their data workloads to the cloud by making cost efficiency a primary concern and keeping it high with our continuous software based monitoring and optimization.
Who are your users?
The current target users are the data infra engineers and the head of data who manage their company's Snowflake instances.
What is your favorite aspect about working at Bluesky?
The sense of being empowered to pursue a direction that we deeply resonate with and think are meaningful, and work with a group of great professionals.
What aspect of your culture do you most fear losing with growth?
Being scrappy and being able to work in a flat way and moving fast and not having to coordinate excessively.
What about your work keeps you up at night?
It keeps me up at night in a good way because I'm excited about the future and there are so many things that we need to tackle. But in a bad way where this is going to be a long journey. So I got to also make sure it's a marathon and not a sprint. So that's something we focus on, the personal, physical, and mental well-being.
So you all are impacting a lot of verticals within AI. What about AI, the future of AI, excites you the most?
What's topical these days are large language models. They are driven by having high quality data. One of the reasons why we started Bluesky from the data angle is a lot of the ML companies first need better data pipelines and better data quality. So that's a good starting point to contribute to AI.
What about the future of AI scares you?
What's immediately on top of my mind is people set the proper expectations of the performance and power of AI. For example, don't blindly trust it if it's just making things up.
Hmm, that's a good answer. What is one of your favorite hobbies?
In addition to thinking about Bluesky and innovating, I enjoy taking time off through hiking. That's my personal form of meditation.
What do you love most about yourself?
Being driven and even obsessed.
Do you believe that there is life on other planets?
I don't have reasons to dismiss that. Emotionally, I hope that is true.
What is your favorite app on your phone right now?
Oh, wow. YouTube. I watch YouTube a lot.
And what is your favorite superhero?
Professor X sounds pretty cool.
Good X-Men reference. Good stuff. Well, I think you have navigated all of those questions. And, a quick plug as well on the YouTube front. We did pick up that there is a podcast that Blue Sky hosts called Above the Clouds. Do you want to quickly give a shout out as to what it's about?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So Above the Clouds is our blue sky production, in quote, where we use some side bandwidth to interview the industry leads in the data area and also entrepreneurs, professionals to learn about their perspectives of the current challenges and the techniques in solving these challenges, like improving cost efficiency, etc. So this is our way of contributing back to the community and also helping integrate Blue Sky into this larger community of the modern data stack and the cloud-based data and ML community.
That's great. Yeah, it seems like there will be some crossover between our audience and yours, so we'll be sure to plug that in the show notes as well. But I just wanted to thank you for spending time with us, Mingsheng. We are excited for the future of what you all are building. We love the space, and I think it's important to have a company like Blue Sky around to help facilitate the growth of other industries like AI at large. So we are rooting for you all, and thanks again for spending time with us.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's really great to be here and look forward to continuing our dialogue.